Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 199 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what's going on with you?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing real well.
Good.
I think we have some really great episodes for everyone this weekend, the one we're getting ready to talk about right now, but we also have one out on True Crime All the Time. That's out now. It's on the murders of Carrie and Stephen Turner. A lot going on in this episode. You know, it's a scary one because we're talking about a son who makes the decision to murder his parents.
Yeah. Very troublesome.
And all the details around that. We continue to see some great support. Let's give some Patreon support shout outs. We had Jay Rabbit.
What up, Jay Rabbit?
Rachel McLaughlin.
Hey, Rachel.
Cat Stevens 42.
Man, some Cat Stevens.
Valentine Ventura.
Hey, Valentine.
Ben Lambert.
Well, how you doing, Ben?
George Lambert.
Hey, George.
It's my other brother, Bill.
Yeah.
My other brother, George. Angela Herrick.
Hey, Angela.
Mitchell Bryant.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Kaylani Gonzalez.
Kaylani.
Jackie McBride.
Hey, Jackie.
Jennifer Hanna.
What's going on, Jennifer?
Emily Culp.
Hey, thanks, Emily.
Mike O'Hanlon.
What's going on, O'Hanlon?
Sherry Spell.
Hey, Sherry.
Afton McVeigh.
Hey, Afton.
Anthony Tedder.
Appreciate that, Anthony.
Verena Schleich.
Varina.
Todd Elphick.
Hey, Todd.
Michael Martorelli.
Ooh, Madarelli.
Lauren Howard.
Hey, Lauren.
JB Sinclair.
That sounds like a bank.
Ritzy, right?
Yeah,
Fancy.
JB Sinclair.
We didn't have to say it like that. Rachel Radney.
Hey, Rachel.
And last but not least, Fauna Chavez.
Hey, Fauna.
And then if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Brent King.
Hey, Brent.
So appreciate the new support, the continued support on Patreon. All of that's amazing. We had some great PayPal donations from Elizabeth Diaz.
What's up, Diaz?
Jennifer Warmuth.
Hey, Jennifer.
Melissa Gerling.
What's going on, Gerling?
And Lissa Lehman.
Well, thank you, Lissa.
So thanks to all of you as well. Gibbs, you and I added something to our weekly Patreon videos and audio that we put out. We were going to do a full-blown Q&A episode, but we had so many questions, we just decided that we would answer some of those questions every week during our regular Patreon weekly minisodes or whatever you want to call them.
Just sprinkle them in there every now and then.
Yeah. So, just a little extra for our Patreon folks. We also had a Patreon merch winner for January, and that was Brittany Just.
Hey, congratulations, Brittany.
So congratulations to Brittany. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We're talking about the 1983 unsolved murders of Stephen Fisher and Melissa Gregory at the Copper Dollar Ranch. It was on Thursday, March 3rd, 1983, that two bodies were found dead near the Copper Dollar Ranch, a horse ranch owned by a guy named Hal Snedeker. The ranch was about 4 miles west of Newton, Iowa, in Jasper County. The bodies, a young male and a young female, were found by Jeff Illingworth, an employee of the Copper Dollar Ranch, around 8 a.m. when he went to water and feed the horses at the stables. He recognized the victims as 20-year-old Stephen Joe Fisher and 17-year-old Melissa Lynn Gregory. Both were part-time Copper Dollar Ranch employees. Stephen Fisher worked on the ranch as a mechanic, and Melissa worked on the ranch as a horse groomer.
What a terrible way to start your morning out.
By finding two dead bodies that happened to be co-workers, wow. I would think that would be quite a traumatic experience for the person that finds the bodies.
I agree.
Stephen Fisher's body was found just outside of a mobile home trailer, parked next to some of the horse stables. He was wearing only a pair of jeans. The body of Melissa Gregory was found inside the trailer, and she was completely nude. Both had significant injuries to their heads, and there was blood everywhere. Now, it was known that Stephen would stay in the mobile home occasionally if he worked late or if he and his wife gotten into an argument because they had recently separated. Rumors circulating around the ranch before the murders were that Stephen and Melissa began dating more than a year before they were found dead. Stephen separated from his wife just several weeks before the murders. After Jeff Illingworth found the bodies, he ran to the neighboring house owned by Rita Ham. Rita told the Des Moines Register that she was awakened by a young man crying. This man told her that Stephen was lying on the ground, and it looked like he had been shot in his head and brutally beaten. Rita called the sheriff, then ran over to the site, and she found Stephen lying outside of the mobile home. Rita Ham told the paper that she and her family returned home Wednesday night. Her bedroom faced the mobile home and was about 200 yards away, but she said she never heard anything, nor did the family's dog Buster, who she said barks at every noise. I have one of those dogs myself, and sometimes my wife and I find it hard to sleep through the night. I mean, This is a dog that at the slightest noise outside thinks that she has to protect us. She weighs about 5 pounds.
Right. Yeah.
She's a Maltese. I don't know what she's going to do. It's great if there was an actual intruder. Not so great when people are just driving down the street and it's 4:00 in the morning and this dog wakes you from a deep sleep. The Jasper County sheriffs were on site within minutes of the call. Gibbs, these injuries were so brutal and bloody that investigators at that time, they weren't sure if the wounds resulted from gunshots, blunt force trauma, or a combination of both. The sheriff called in the Division of Criminal Investigation to assist in the case. The bodies were taken to Northwest Hospital in Des Moines, where an autopsy was performed that night. The time of death for both victims was estimated at between 11 p.m. Wednesday to early Thursday morning before 3 a.m. So, I mean, that's not a huge window, right? We're talking about a 4-hour period of time. It could be huge when you're talking about suspects and alibis, but you and I have seen them where it's been days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, shorter the window, the better it is. But
well, and they found these bodies fairly quickly. So I thought maybe based on that, they could narrow it even further. But again, I want to keep in mind, this is 1983. I'm sure if they were checking it today or examining, the techniques have probably improved dramatically.
Oh, I would assume so.
And they could probably narrow it down even further. The police held back the details of the coroner's report and refused to give out the cause of death. It was leaked that the damage to the victims' faces was so bad that the medical examiner had to use dental records to make positive identifications.
That tells you something.
Yeah, I think it tells you how brutal these attacks were, how traumatic or how devastating the injuries were, especially to the head and face.
Right. I don't think we're shocked by the police holding back the information because they do that a lot of times to help the investigation.
Yeah, to help in identifying a viable suspect. But this is also, it's not a case where they didn't have a good idea of who these individuals were.
Right.
Right. So the fact that they couldn't make a positive identification by looking at them, that really tells you something in a case like this, because these were people that worked there. They had a good idea of who slept in that trailer and who might have been there. The police interviewed Stephen's 23-year-old wife and the mother of his 2 children, Terri Fisher. They talked about the rocky relationship they had and about Stephen having a girlfriend. The police also took some of Terry's clothing from the home as potential evidence.
I mean, I'm not too surprised that they would have the initial interview with his spouse. It happens in almost every case.
Yeah, it does. And I think if you look at this case specifically, you have a couple who had recently separated. You've got all of these rumors floating around that the husband has been having an affair that maybe quite possibly dates back a year or more before the separation.
Right.
I think in a case like that, you're even more apt to want to talk to the spouse because you've got some motive there, possibly. Investigators also spoke to Stephen's mother, Thelma Fisher, as well as Melissa's mother, Ida Reynolds, to determine, what they knew, if they had any inkling who might have wanted to hurt their children. In September of 1983, both victims' families thought police were holding back some information about the case. Stephen's wife, Terri, told the Des Moines Register in September that something funny was going on with the investigation because, as she thought, it was just too hush-hush. Like they were playing it too close to the vest, I guess.
Well, sometimes investigators do that, right?
They do. Now, as a member of the victim's family, you'd like to think the police are telling you everything they know. It's not always the case, and it's definitely not the case if they are even remotely interested in you or looking at you as a potential suspect.
Yeah. Why would they want to tell you what they're thinking?
The Jasper County attorney's response to Terry's comments was that the investigation was active and they were still talking to witnesses. He further said that in the past 6 months, they had interviewed about 100 people and had interviewed some of them more than once. So I think he's trying to, make a jab back saying, we're doing our job. We're out there. We're talking to people. We've interviewed a bunch of people. Some of them we've even followed up on.
Very active.
During this time, investigators still did not want to say if the victims had been shot in the head or if they had been hit with multiple blows to the head. No doubt the head wounds were massive, and a local paper discovered the death certificates stated both victims died from blunt force trauma to the head.
But even with that being leaked out, the investigators still held firm with not releasing the cause of death.
But Gibbs, in any community, the rumors are going to fly, especially when something like this happens. I think people knew these attacks had been incredibly brutal. The community thought the killer was some type of maniac. Many people thought the murders might have been related to illegal drug activity. Thelma Fisher said after her son was killed, she had to get an unlisted number because she had someone calling asking for her dead son during the middle of the night. She also had someone who kept calling and breathing hard into the phone.
Some sick individuals out there.
Yes, and you and I have talked about this before. I know you've had your own experience with this, or your family had a similar experience to this. It's sick in the form of people knowing that someone lost their life in a horrific way.
Right.
And they have no connection to the case. Let's just assume. But they're playing a game with the victims' families. That's horrible.
Yeah. You have a grieving mother? Let her grieve, man.
Ida told the paper her daughter was dead because she was at the wrong place at the wrong time. By the end of 1983, the authorities released the information that Stephen and Melissa were both murdered by multiple blows to the head. But they didn't have the weapon used in the blunt force attack, and they didn't have a suspect they could charge. So the murder cases of Stephen and Melissa went cold. In June 1987, Terri Fisher petitioned the courts to return her clothing, but the judge denied her request.
If you were her, I'm assuming that was not something you wanted to hear. I mean, you really would want your clothes back. If they're not going to give your clothes back to you, why? Why are they still holding my clothes?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of questions you can ask. Number one, I don't know that we know how much clothing was taken.
Right.
But we're 4 years later. So if we're talking an outfit or two, are those outfits something that you really, really need back because you don't have enough clothes to wear? Or you just really like those outfits? Or is there something else going on where you're worried that the police are still holding them? And like you said, why are they holding them?
Right.
In 1988, on the 5th anniversary of the double murders of Stephen and Melissa, investigators hired a crime scene expert by the name of Herbert McDonnell. He used a new laser technology to look for traces of fingerprints, blood spatter, and stains on the evidence that was seized 5 years earlier. But even with this new technology, the investigators developed no new leads, and this case remained cold for the next 20 years.
And how cool would that have been when you had that new technology roll out? Even today we see that come out, and I know we all get excited. A few years ago, how the DNA advancements came along, and we were all excited about that.
Oh, sure, genetic genealogy,
Yeah.
and not just us, right? Not just armchair detectives who are interested in cold cases, but detectives.
Yeah.
Actual cold case detectives. Think about these detectives working this case, and they just are not getting anywhere. And all of a sudden they learn that, hey, there's this brand new technology that could shed light on DNA that we collected 5 years earlier. You'd be elated.
Oh, yeah.
You'd be anxious. Then you'd also be deflated.
Oh,
when you found out that, hey, we did it all and really nothing of value came from it.
but still, you got to think. So maybe it didn't help this case, this new laser technology, but it had to help some other cases out there. And I just think it's really interesting how this new technology comes into play with all these other cases.
I think you think about technology all the time, right? Computers, iPhones, video, TVs, recorders. You think about all that stuff through the years, and we kind of, we're in all of it for a little bit, and then we kind of take it for granted.
Right.
But apply it to solving a murder, right? Me watching a DVD of Lord of the Rings is, on the grand scale of things, not very important.
Right.
But solving a murder and giving a family back, let's say a victim's name, because they don't know what happened to their loved one, learning how they died, or, even the ultimate, which is all of that plus identifying the killer and putting them behind bars. Okay. Much, much more important than me being able to watch a higher resolution of The Godfather.
Exactly.
Yeah. In 2008, Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation Special Agent in Charge Adam DeCamp told the Des Moines Register the DCI had begun looking at this case again. They had a person of interest, and they had received some additional witness statements about that person of interest. The problem they still had was really no physical evidence, and they didn't have any witnesses that could directly tie this person of interest to the murders.
So I get what they're saying. They don't have any physical evidence. They don't have the murder weapon. Without the murder weapon, it's going to be very difficult to do anything with these persons of interest that some of these witnesses may have implicated.
Well, and I think it's what's so tough about, some of these unsolved cases. Police can have all the theories they want. They can even have some really good, viable persons of interest, suspects. But if you don't have the evidence that can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person was involved in the murder or whatever the crime is, you don't have everything you need, because our system, and rightfully so, is designed so that you have to prove.
Right.
You can't just think. You can't just believe that a person did this, or this. You have to be able to prove to a court or a panel of judges that, beyond a reasonable doubt, this person did it.
Yeah. And that's not easy to do.
I think it's why some of these cases are so hard to solve. And it's going to come up big in this case.
Yeah.
It would be 5 more years before the case heated up again. The Jasper County Sheriff was interested in opening up the cold case in 2012 and reached out to the producers of the show Cold Justice. The show agreed to help with the case in 2013. And this is a show that probably a lot of listeners are familiar with. It originally started on TNT and then I think has since moved over to Oxygen. I think it's still going strong today. But the sheriff said the program could provide investigative tools that they didn't have at their disposal. The show's host is a successful retired prosecutor who teams up with retired investigators to try to solve cold cases. The show began filming their episode in February 2014 with interviews with the victims' relatives in Newton, Iowa, and then with Stephen Fisher's widow, Terri, who by this time had reverted to her maiden name of Supino and was living in Altoona, Iowa. The show put Terri Supino in the limelight, basically saying Gibbs that she was the prime suspect. Now, the timing of the show was critical. It wouldn't air until March 28th, but when it did, the show would have a grand ending to the episode.
And boy, did they ever.
They did, because on Monday, March 3rd, 2014, 31 years to the day since the double murders of Stephen Fisher and Melissa Gregory, authorities arrested and charged 53-year-old Terri Supino with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of her husband, Stephen, and his girlfriend, Melissa. She was facing 2 life sentences if found guilty, and the arrest was caught on video by Cold Justice to use at the end of their episode.
That's good TV.
It's amazing timing.
Yes.
You know, it's both great TV and amazing timing.
Well, you got them right on the anniversary date.
Terri was booked into the Jasper County Jail pending her trial. Her bond was set at $400,000. You know, that seems like a reasonable number to me. You know, you and I just talked on our episode of TCAT about a couple of people that were charged with murder, and their bail was set at like $50,000.
Yeah, for a double murder, just like this one.
And I thought, wow, I think we both thought that is so low. Now, Terri's was eventually reduced to $300,000, but she could never post it and was forced to stay in jail awaiting trial. Terri pleaded not guilty at her March 10th hearing. And in something I found a little bit strange, she entered her plea by a handwritten letter. I just found that odd because, you know, you see it all the time. The defendant stands up. The judge asks them, how do you plead? They say, not guilty, guilty, whatever. But what do? You slide your handwritten note to the judge, or your attorney walks it up?
Right. Here you go. This is it right here.
And the judge has to read it out. At this preliminary hearing, the county sheriff presented his probable cause statement that he had filed a week before. The statement alleged that Terri Supino told a coworker back in 2001 that she and her twin brother, Tim, killed someone. Terri's family, including the 2 children she had with Stephen, Rocky and Casey, felt that the prosecutors didn't have enough evidence to convict her. I think on top of that, Gibbs, they also believe she was innocent.
And that says a lot when you think about the fact that this is Stephen's kids as well, because, you know, they want their dad's murder solved.
Yeah, you know, they want the murder of their father solved. I think they had to have been extremely young. We didn't have their ages, I don't believe, at the time Stephen was killed. So they would have been raised by their mother. That's the person that they knew. I really don't even know how much recollection they would have had of their father.
If any.
If any. So it's not surprising that they would stick by the side of their mom and say, but no way that this woman who raised us, gave us what we needed, fed us, clothed us, would have or could have killed our father. Terry's trial started on February 3rd, 2015. In its opening statement, the prosecution told the jury of 10 women and 4 men that they would call 30 witnesses and produce evidence that Terri Sapino knew about the affair Stephen was having with Melissa. The prosecution had a witness named Sandra Couples, who was friends with Melissa. She told the court that though she did not care for Stephen and how he pitted the 2 women against each other, she recalled one night when she and Melissa were out on the town at the local bar. Stephen and Terri walked in, and Stephen encouraged Terri to fight Melissa, and she did. But it didn't go her way. Melissa beat her to the ground and apparently embarrassed her in front of the large crowd at the bar.
No one likes that. Nobody likes to be embarrassed in a fight.
How would you know? You've never been embarrassed in a fight in your life.
Well, that's if you lose.
That's what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
I know for a fact you've never lost a fight.
I'm just saying if
So you're speaking out of your rear end.
Well, I looked at the other people walking away with their head down.
Another witness, Lori French, told the jury she worked with Terri at a deli. She said on the stand that Terri opened up to her one day about catching her husband with Melissa in bed over a half dozen times, and that she said if she caught them again, they would never talk or walk again. All right, that's a pretty decent threat, to not be able to walk again and to not be able to talk again. You would have to sustain some devastating injuries.
Sure. But if you're catching your spouse in bed with somebody else a half dozen times, you're going to be angry and you're going to say things. Doesn't mean you mean them, but you could also mean them. It just depends.
No, but the fact that you say them,
Yeah.
once you go on trial for murder, they're going to come back against you.
They will.
So, a lot of people say things in anger. They don't mean them.
Right.
But they're probably never going to end up on trial for murder either.
Well,
But you
right.
never know. So, you probably should be careful about what you say. Witness Pam DeBruin told jurors she once heard Terri threaten to beat the shit out of Melissa. Another witness who lived next door to Terri told the jury that years after the murders, Terri said to her, "If I couldn't have him, no one could."
Again, something you really don't want out there. You don't want the jurors to hear that you made that type of statement.
No, I don't think it's good for you as the defendant. But Gibbs, I think we're going to be talking about, some of this testimony by different individuals. How much did it really mean to the jury, as we go along? Because again, this is not evidence of guilt. You don't have any smoking guns here that prove that Terri killed Stephen and Melissa. What you have is a lot of people saying some really kind of damaging, incriminating things, but it's not direct evidence type stuff.
Right. And there's no doubt that Stephen and Terri didn't have this storybook marriage.
No, I think it was safe to say it was very rocky.
Right.
I mean, they had separated weeks before the murders. Melissa's sister told jurors that she recalled Terri coming by her parents' home looking for Stephen. She said that Terri called their mom a bitch. And when she did, Melissa flew down the stairs and beat Terry's ass right there. And Terri was pissed about that.
Again, nobody likes getting their ass beat.
No, you're right about that. But I thought this was interesting testimony by Melissa's sister, saying her sister flew down the stairs, beat Terry's ass. Terri was pissed. Just the language that she used on the stand,
Right.
I thought was interesting. Prosecutors presented evidence that Terri and her twin brother, Tim Sapino, admitted that they went to the ranch on the night of the murders looking for Stephen. Tim told them that they had gone to the ranch around 11 p.m. on March 2nd. Prosecutors said this was Terry's opportunity and jealousy was her motive. She found Stephen and Melissa in bed together and beat them both in the head with a sharp, heavy object and continued to do so in a fit of rage. And I think to back that up, the medical examiner took the stand and told the jury that Stephen's face and head were hit in a chopping-like motion 17 times.
Brutal.
Very brutal. Well, we talked about it, right? The brutality of this crime scene.
Right.
The fact that they had to use dental records to identify them. Melissa was struck with the same chopping motion 13 times, and her nose had been broken.
You can get a sense of rage.
Yes, I think you can. The medical examiner also said the killer used their left hand, and it was pointed out by the prosecution that Terri Supino was ambidextrous.
But so is a lot of people.
Really? Are a lot of people ambidextrous?
Yeah, I think there is. I'm good with my left and right hand, but I'm left-handed. I can do everything with my right hand that I do with my left. My left just does it better.
Okay, now you're getting into an area that I don't want to know about. Let me ask you this. Can you throw a baseball with both hands?
I can.
Equally well?
My left hand does it better.
Okay. Because when I think of ambidextrous, I think you can pretty much do the same thing with both hands at the same level.
Yeah.
Right? I can...
Equally.
I can write with either hand. It looks good. Now, I can't. I can write with my right hand. If I try to do it with my left hand, it's all over the place.
I can say for sure if I write with my left hand or my right hand, it looks terrible either way.
Okay.
So equally.
So maybe you are ambidextrous. The prosecution team told the jury that they had preserved evidence from 1983 and that advancements in DNA could prove Stephen had sex with his wife that day and then with Melissa that night before they were murdered. The prosecution also played an audio recording they captured of Terri in the jail shortly after her arrest, saying she had killed Stephen Fisher, her husband. Now, Gibbs, at some point during this trial, someone called in a bomb threat, which interrupted the trial. Obviously, if you got a bomb threat, you take that seriously. It caused a big delay and ultimately caused the trial to be moved to a different venue.
You got to look out for the safety of the people in the trial.
Absolutely. Safety first. Now, the defense team said in their opening that Terri was not the killer. They claim that the former ranch owner, Hal Snedeker, was trafficking marijuana from Florida to Iowa and that Stephen made runs for his boss to Florida to buy more drugs when needed. The defense said Stephen feared for his life because to get out of trouble with the law, he informed on his boss at the ranch. And he had some concerns that his boss found out that he had ratted him out.
Well, if you're going to be an informant, you got to be really careful because it can come back to bite you in the rear.
No, it definitely can. I mean, just out of self-preservation, right? When you're talking about informing on someone who's done something that's going to put them away for a long time, there's a real incentive to do away with you so
Sure.
that you can't follow through and then later testify at trial. You know, nobody wants to go to prison for a long time.
Nobody does.
And many people, as we've seen covering as many cases as we have, are not above murder if that's what they feel they have to do to keep themselves out of prison.
If you back them into a corner, they're going to come out and do what they need to do.
The defense went on to say the prosecution had no murder weapon, no DNA to put their client at the murder scene. All they had was some circumstantial evidence that really didn't prove anything. And I think one of the big questions that the defense team asked was that if this crime was so brutal, as everyone said it was, why couldn't the prosecution present evidence found on Terri's clothes that they kept back in 1983 that showed she was there that night and committed the murders?
Yeah, it was a bloody scene, a very bloody scene. Where's that evidence at?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you look at it, the defense is making some sense. If you're saying this woman killed two people and you have the clothes that she was supposedly wearing that night, why are you not presenting evidence showing that there was blood from one or both individuals on her clothing?
Yeah.
Because if you think about how the prosecution and the medical examiner claim that the murders happened, they happened very up close, right? Swinging a blunt object 17 times, 13, 14 times.
In such rage.
The blood spatter, and we said there was blood everywhere. The blood spatter would have been tremendous.
Yeah.
Whoever committed these crimes would have been covered in blood. I just don't think there's any way around that. So as a juror, if you're listening to this question being posed by the defense, is there a light bulb that goes off in your mind and you're saying, wow, how is that? How is it that you're not able to prove to us using that evidence that you obviously have to have, right?
Right.
I get it. There was no DNA in 1983, but I couldn't find anywhere where it said, okay, there was blood all over the clothing, but by the time advancements in DNA were made, we couldn't get a good sample. Maybe that's the case, but I could not find that anywhere.
Right. And if they could, they would have presented it.
Yes, definitely. The prosecution called a crime lab expert to the stand who told jurors that Stephen was hit so hard in the head, his brain matter was found several feet away from his body.
Which just aligns with what you just said about the brutality of the attack, the spatter of the blood, brain matter. You think you would have seen it somewhere.
And again, the defense pointed out that, okay, that's true, right? The people that you're bringing up, giving this scientific evidence, will concede these points as being a fact. But we're saying Terri had nothing to do with these tragic murders, and you don't have any physical evidence to prove she did. The defense reminded the jury that back in 1983, Terri weighed a whopping 80 pounds.
That's tiny, man.
It's very tiny. It also probably helps explain why she kept getting her ass handed to her in these fights that we talked about.
Yeah, it's probably very true.
So the defense question was, how did an 80-pound woman overpower two other adults with no drugs or alcohol in their systems? And they added the fact that there was a loaded shotgun by the bed in the trailer.
Well, I think it'd be hard for an 80-pound person to overpower two people. I just think it would be. Now, granted, if you get that first hit in and you hit hard, maybe you knock one of them unconscious while you attack the other person.
Yeah.
So it's possible.
I think it's always possible. Now, is it easy? Probably not. But, if you were able to surprise somebody, especially if they were groggy, sleepy, asleep, I don't know what state the victims were in, but you can swing an object twice pretty quickly. So if you made contact with both victims in rapid succession, and like you said, were able to kind of incapacitate both, then I think that's how you would have been able to do it. And then you could rain blows on either one or both.
And knowing that it was a act of rage, adrenaline's up, somebody that's 80 pounds could potentially attack like they're a 200-pound person.
Sure. Get all that rage and adrenaline going. The defense team also said that the jail recording that the prosecution made such a big deal about was really just Terri being confused about why she had been arrested, in that she read the charge over the prison phone to her brother Tim, where the charge said she killed Stephen Fisher. It was not a confession, as the prosecution had made it out to be. On Friday, February 20th, 2015, after the 14-person jury deliberated for 6.5 hours, the judge read Terri subpoena her fate. The courtroom was full of both Stephen's and Melissa's family members, as well as Terri's family. The judge read the verdict. The jurors found Terri not guilty on both charges of first-degree murder of her late husband, Stephen Fisher, and his girlfriend, Melissa Gregory. Terri broke down in tears, and it was reported, Gibbs, that her son, Rocky, had to hold her up so that she didn't fall over while they both cried.
Well, you have to imagine how stressful this trial had to be for her. Spending a year in jail, waiting for the trial, and then finally having her trial, and then being acquitted.
Well, stressful from the standpoint that you're fighting for your life.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not acquitted, you're spending the rest of your life in prison, possibly, most likely.
And I think sitting at that table, it could have went either way. I think when you look at her at that table, waiting to hear the verdict, you can see she is very nervous.
I think as anyone would be.
Yeah, because your rest of your life is in the hands of those 14 individuals, and you hope that they see your side of the events and not the other side.
As Terri left the courtroom, she told law enforcement to, quote, leave me the hell alone. She also told the Des Moines Register and other press outlets that she was considering suing the television show Cold Justice and the investigators associated with it. She had been very vocal that if it were not for that show, she would have never been arrested, rotting away in jail from her kids, and had to go through the trial. She wanted them to pay for what they put her through. And Terri's threat of a lawsuit against the show was not the first suit against Cold Justice. According to a February 2015 article in the Des Moines Register, Joshua Singletary filed a defamation suit after an episode of Cold Justice suggested he was involved in the fatal stabbing of a woman in Nashville, Tennessee. Singletary was charged with first-degree murder, but eventually the prosecutors had to drop the charges against him because they lacked the evidence to prosecute.
And I think his case here was the fact that the show never stated that at the end of the episode, right? They had the opportunity to say that, but failed to. And that's kind of where the lawsuit stemmed from.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised by that because my understanding was the show aired after that decision had already been made. So why not put that, up on the screen as kind of a, okay, I know we've said all these things, right, but at the end of the day, the charges against him were dropped.
Yeah, put a little disclaimer up there.
And it's something that you and I have talked about before, maybe not on air, but off, about the fact that you do have to be careful.
Yeah.
When you're talking about individuals who may be, let's say, a prime suspect in the eyes of the police, whether they've been charged or not, but let's say the charges were dropped, you have a duty to kind of say that in the right way and not say certain things, but omit other things that kind of tell the whole story. I mean, I'm not really bagging on the show Cold Justice. It's more about you and I being fair to people. And, you can think all day long that somebody is a murderer. And we'll probably talk about it at the end of this episode.
Sure.
But if they're tried and acquitted or the charges are dropped against them, well, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And until something else happens, that's where it stands. Terri's son, Rocky, told the press that he watched his mom go through the stress of being in jail for something she didn't do. He hoped that her not guilty verdict puts an end to the family's tragic ordeal. The investigators and county attorney felt confident with their case. They said it's very unlikely that anyone else will ever face charges. They said they would close the case, but they would consider reopening it if someone came forward with new information.
So that's a pretty strong statement to make, that they consider the case closed.
I think it tells you just exactly how sure they were in their minds that Terri Supino was guilty.
Yeah.
And again, you and I have talked about this. As a prosecutor, if you've gotten to that stage where you're moving forward with the trial, you have to, in your mind, think that the person is guilty.
Yeah. Otherwise, what are you doing on that stage?
Right. Then if not, then you shouldn't be moving forward with it. So when the trial doesn't go your way or the verdict doesn't go your way, it's not as though these prosecutors all of a sudden say, well, I must have been wrong.
Right.
Because They don't believe they were wrong. They believe that what they did was right, and the jury just didn't see it their way.
I mean, for the victims' families, how disappointed would they have to be?
Oh, extremely. I assume that they thought, and rightfully so, that if this woman was being charged, the police, the prosecution, they had the evidence and they were going to be able to convict her. Now, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. We'll talk about that. But obviously the jury didn't see it that way. So at the end of the day, what are the families left with? They're completely, I won't say they're completely back to square one. They don't have a conviction. Now, they may feel in a similar way to the prosecutors that, okay, we know who did it, but the jury decided that they couldn't convict her.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know how they feel.
Yeah.
There's a number of different ways they could feel, and certain family members could differ, right, in their feelings. Terri Supino filed a defamation lawsuit against the county sheriff and prosecutor who brought her to trial. The lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court in Des Moines named both the Jasper County attorney and sheriff as defendants and included 2 counts for defamation and another for deprivation of constitutional rights. The complaint accused both officials of making statements that implied Supino killed the couple, even after the jury delivered its verdict. The lawsuit sought monetary damages, including punitive damages of $500,000.
That's a healthy lawsuit.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. But I think this is the prosecution losing or having a verdict not go their way when they very much felt that this person was guilty. I think the key word here is implied.
Right.
And that word is very vague, in my opinion. If you imply something, then to me, you're not coming out and saying that we think this woman is guilty. Because to me, you're not implying, you're actually saying.
Right.
To me, implying is saying, well, we're going to close the case because we're not going to charge anybody else, because why would we? Right.
Right.
So I don't know exactly what the word implied relates to as far as the defamation suit. I didn't see exactly what the details were, but to me, that's kind of how I look at it.
It comes down to how you want to define that term.
Well, and ultimately, if you're filing a lawsuit, it comes down to how a judge views it.
Exactly.
On October 13th, 2017, a federal judge dismissed Supino's defamation suit. According to the AP, U.S. District Judge Rebecca Goodgame Ebinger ruled that Terri Supino's defamation claims lacked adequate legal basis. The federal judge said that she couldn't sue under the U.S. Constitution for reputational harms, and she failed to sufficiently plead a state claim. Supino was denied the $500,000 in damages. No one from Cold Justice was named as a party in the federal defamation suit. And I think that probably tells you something right there. My feeling is they most likely didn't come out and say that she killed them. They might have laid out all these theories or all these different things that could have happened.
And I'm guessing when they interviewed her on that show, and I don't know this as fact, but I'm assuming that some type of disclosure was signed to air her interview in the show. And maybe that was some form of protection for the show as well.
Well, and maybe in addition, like a hold harmless or, some kind of document that either required arbitration or limited their liability.
Right.
But that's it, Gibbs, for the 1983 unsolved murders of Stephen Fisher and Melissa Gregory at the Copper Dollar Ranch. To me, this is a very interesting case. 2 brutal murders of, 2 pretty young individuals.
Yeah.
I think if you just look at it on the surface, by using the information that we were able to obtain, you would most likely immediately kind of gravitate towards the spouse, right? Because of the situation, recently separated. Husband had been having an affair for over a year?
Yeah.
And then I think you have to go to, some of the testimony at trial. Some of it was very incriminating. But, like I said, was there one thing that you could point to and say, oh, yep, no doubt she had to have done it?
Right.
And there are some things that to me would have met that, right? DNA testing on the clothes, blood spatter all over the clothes and her clothes. And it turns out to be both Stephen and Melissa's. Okay. Kind of hard for me not to think you were there that night and swung something multiple times and killed both these people. I think that's one of the burning questions that I have from this case. The problem is you and I can't answer it because we couldn't find it. But I think it's telling that the prosecution had it, didn't introduce it at all. So what does that normally mean? It wasn't going to help their case, meaning either there was no blood spatter on there or there was, but they couldn't prove that it was either Stephen's or Melissa's.
And I think you are up against a wall when you go to trial 30 some years later with only circumstantial evidence. I think it's just a tough sell.
It is, because look at the things that were said, right? I had a conversation with Terri. She said, if I catch him again, he won't be able to talk. They won't be able to talk. They won't be able to walk.
But that's one person making a statement. I mean, under oath.
Yeah. I mean,
still,
I think you have to ask two questions. Number one, are these people telling the truth?
Right.
That's a question you always have to ask.
Sure.
And number two, okay, even if they are, what does that information mean?
Yeah. So people can say anything they want to say, but what does that really mean? It's just words.
Or what does that really prove? And I think to me, that's the key.
Right.
All these things, they don't make you look good as a defendant, but at the end of the day, in the minds of the jury, because that's really all that matters, right? At the end of the day, when the jury gets into that deliberation room, what do all of these pieces of evidence put forth by the prosecution really mean?
Yeah.
And is it enough to push it past that hurdle needed to convict? And obviously in this case, for this jury, it wasn't. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out, Gibbs?
Let's hear those voicemails.
Hey, fellas. Man, I listen to like every episode. I haven't gone on the Unsolved yet, but you work on projects and just sit there and kind of zone out listening to it. And you both are just amazing. Passed on your info to a bunch of different friends of mine as well. Just so fun to listen to, and it doesn't get old. It just keeps me, while I'm working on stuff, thought process is really going towards a little bit towards what I'm doing, a little bit towards that as well. And, disturbing, crazy, awesome, funny, a little bit of everything. I just really appreciate you guys, what you do. So thank you. And keep your own time ticket. Keep your own time ticket. Had a Gibby moment there.
Pretty funny that he called that a Gibby moment.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
That's going to make its way into like the Urban Dictionary or something.
Maybe.
And I'm going to laugh.
Yes, you will.
Now, he said he hasn't made it to Unsolved yet. So maybe eventually someday he'll hear his voicemail.
Yeah. 199 episodes later.
Exactly.
Yeah, you'll get there.
But we appreciate it. It was a lot of nice things.
Yeah, we do.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. It's Rose. I called about a year ago now. I just wanted to call back because I'm on the way to Oklahoma to see Cal, who is the crochet freak that keeps sending me stuff. And I just wanted to wish her a happy birthday because I'm spending her birthday with her, and she doesn't know I'm doing this. So, happy birthday, and we absolutely love your podcast and actually listening to it on the way down to Oklahoma. Love you, and keep your own time ticking.
Oklahoma's... Oh, wait.
Sing it. You almost got into it there.
That was just me.
I know you're a big fan of show tunes.
Yeah, I do like show tunes.
I know you do.
Yeah.
So, cut out a little bit there, but I think that the person that was intended for will get it. We've received quite a bit of crochet stuff, some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Over the years.
I'm wearing crochet boxers right now.
Boy, those would be comfortable.
Not really doing the job they should be doing, though.
But they're both really big fans of the show, and we appreciate it.
Hi, boys. My name is Jocelyn from California. I've actually only just started listening to you recently, but your podcast has been amazing. It's the first podcast I've ever listened to. I'm a little behind the times. 2020 was rough. My mom died really unexpectedly. Had to sell my childhood home, quit a job I loved to start taking care of my father with dementia full time. Whole bunch of family fallout, and I spent months just feeling sorry for myself and barely getting out of bed and not taking care of myself. And on a whim, I started listening to your podcast, and I can get out of bed and I can do things, and I listen to your podcast while I'm cooking, cleaning, working out, doing things around the house. I feel like a human again, and it's probably a little weird that a morbid subject did all this for me, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. I kind of feel like I'm starting to get my life back, so keep up the good work, stay safe, and thank you again.
Well, we know 2020 was rough on just about everyone.
Yeah.
You had it really rough, and my condolences. I know, Gibby, you feel the same way.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a rough year to have to go through all of those things. Gibbs, what continues to amaze me is how we're finding out that the podcast is helping someone in this way or that way, ways that you and I never imagined when we first started this at all. But it's very gratifying that however it helps somebody, that they're getting something out of it.
Yeah.
Okay, is it entertaining? I hope so. Are you learning something? I hope so. But then we hear about, okay, it's getting people through this or that, or, it really means a lot.
If what we do can help you even just a little bit, we're very happy with that.
Yeah, we are. But we appreciate you taking the time to call in. We're glad you're doing well. All right. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.